Hello and welcome to Conversations with Mahini and also Coconut Chats, because today I'm doing an interview that's going to be used for both of the platforms that I'm a part of, because as you'll see very soon, our guest very well fits the description of both of my podcasts. Today I'm interviewing an award-winning filmmaker and journalist, Subina Shrestha. She has had her stories in the likes of the New York Times and Al Jazeera. Her Al Jazeera documentaries have been used by various educational institutions, including Columbia Journalism School and by human rights organizations in The Hague, to discuss modern-day slavery. Her coverage on Nepal's earthquake earned her an Emmy nomination, and she was also a 2017 Nieman Fellow at Harvard. Her latest documentary film, named Devi, will be screened at the New Zealand Documentary Edge Film Festival between the 23rd of June and 31st of July this year. This movie traces one Nepalese activist's path from survivor of sexual violence to seeker of justice. In 1997, a 17-year-old Devi was arrested, accused of being a rebel, tortured, and raped in custody. A civil war had just begun, and rebel leaders revealed her as a rape victim. They tagged her with this shameful taboo, and Devi battled depression, social ostracism, and joined the rebel frontlines. She rose through the ranks, even serving as a member of the parliament when the war ended. Shot as an immersive verité, the film travels with Devi as she consolidates the voices of survivors. As Devi confronts her former lawyer and her counsellor, the film dives into deeply intimate and vulnerable moments. Through her diary, supported by archives and sweeping images, Devi reconstructs history and reconstructs the history that was erased to rewrite a new destiny. Welcome, Subina. How are you?
Thank you, Harita. I'm very well, thank you.
I have to say, I know that this film isn't out in public yet because it will be when it's part of the film festival. But when I was watching it, obviously to research you and the movie, I was just in tears from watching it.
Oh, thank you.
And the thing that made me cry more was knowing that it's all real. You know,
Mhm.
when sometimes when you see movies that are not documentaries, you think, oh, yes, okay, it's a bit fictionalized and exaggerated, but this was all real because it's following one person's life. And it's just unbelievable, I think. For me, it also kind of, in a way, hit home a little bit more because even though I'm born and brought up in New Zealand, um, my family's from India, which is very close to Nepal. And I know that these type of things still happen in India today as well. So it just kind of hit home in that way that I haven't personally been through it, but just, it's like my people. And uh, just, I'm so glad that someone's made a film about it.
Yeah,
Um,
that's it. The amazing thing about it is like, when we say things like when we talk about it in terms of Nepal or India, that things like this happen, it's it's the film is about wartime rape, and war happens and is happening everywhere, right?
mhm.
And wartime rape happens everywhere. And people kind of pigeonhole it as a film on Nepal or a film on India or, um, a film on rape. But it's like, it's such a global story that it happened. Like um, and that's that's something that I've been trying to kind of reach across to people is that, the the idea of wartime rape, like people started to think about it only in the 90s when Bosnia happened. And it was only in 1998 was that rape was accepted as a war crime after Rome Statute. And it was like in 2008 that the UN Security Council kind of passed a resolution that rape and sexual violence constituted a war crime and crime against humanity. And since then, do you know how many people have been convicted by the ICC, the International Criminal Court? Zero.
Yeah, I was going to say not many.
Zero. So this is a global story. This is a story that's happening right now. Um, and that's the thing. It's like it's all of our people. It's all of our women. And it's yeah. So sorry, I took you away
No,
from your question.
that's
It's
completely fine.
yeah. Um yeah, it's a story of all our women, and it keeps happening. And that's yeah, that's
Yep.
such a continuous problem. It's heartbreaking at the same time. It fills your heart with joy to see people like Devi, right, who kind of charge against the flow, charge against the governments who try
Mm,
to stop her, to challenge them. Yeah.
yep.
Sorry. Go ahead. Ask me
It takes
questions.
a very, very brave person to do what she did, though, because so
Yeah.
many people would just be too scared, or they'd have people telling them, don't speak up, or this will happen to you. And, it takes a very, very unique person to actually stand their ground and do something about it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Which, like, A, I'm so glad she did, but B, also the fact that someone followed that story and documented it. Because then on the other
Yeah.
hand, someone might stand up for themselves and do all this, but then there might be no proof or movie
Yeah.
showing that this is how it
Yeah.
happened. Yeah. I guess before we get into the movie in more detail, though, what inspired you to take on the unique career journey of filmmaking and specifically filming documentaries? Was it something you always wanted to do, or was there a turning point in your life?
Um, I mean, in terms of being a storyteller, I mean, I've always been a kind of storyteller. I used to think that I used to be unique, but then later on, when I thought about it, like, my grandmother, who's completely uneducated, used to tell stories and used to kind of string these complex stories and come back to the same point after half an hour, and would have, constructed this story kind of that knitted the past to the present. And it took me a long time to realize that I did not come here by myself, that, generations of women have kind of led me here. And it's also that, I come from a region which has a lot of stories. And I wanted to tell these stories all the time. And I've always been a restless person as well. So when I started telling these stories, I mean, I really wanted to tell these stories. And I'm the kind of person that I was, like, nobody was surprised that I took this path.
That's good. So I'm glad that people saw it in you as well.
Yeah.
It brings me to my next question, actually. How did your friends and family and those close to you react with your decision to take this career path?
Uh,
Did anyone ever try to stop you or talk you out of it?
I mean, my mother at times would kind of like close her eyes, especially when I went to dangerous places, and just kind of pretend that it wasn't happening. Um, but no, I think, I mean, I come from a family of like rather strong women who just do what they do. And I think it would be quite difficult to, I mean, nobody has stopped. I think to they wouldn't want to argue with me, and they wouldn't want to stop me, I don't think.
I fully get that. I think I'm quite a lot like that. My
Exactly.
if I want to do something, my mum does that thing where she just closes her eyes as well. That's why I laughed.
Yeah,
If I want to
exactly.
do something, or like with podcasting, if I want to interview a particular person that might be a bit controversial or something, she just says, "Oh, okay then." and then she just moves on to a different topic.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
my husband and my dad and my brother, they all know that I'm going to do what I want to do, no matter how much they try to talk me out of it. So the best thing they can
Exactly.
do is just be supportive or just watch on the sidelines.
There you go.
Yeah. But it's really good to know that, your family were supportive of you as well. Also because, like you said, you've been to some parts of the world that are war zones, and also not just the fact that they're war zones, but they have lots of crime and lots of things going on where, like, the ordinary person would not want to go there on a holiday. Um, and on top of that, the fact that you're a woman. Um,
Hmm.
I guess have you ever second guessed any of the countries that you've been to through your work? And um, have you ever been cautious about the type of stories that you report on when you're there?
I mean, I haven't been to a lot of war zones. I mean, I stopped quite early on. I used to cover Myanmar a lot. But then it was um I mean, partly I couldn't cover a lot of war zones because I'm a Nepali. I've carried a Nepali passport. It doesn't allow you to go to a lot of countries, right? But also, the funny thing was, like, when I covered Myanmar, it's like Myanmar people look like me. Like what you said about, like, feeling the affinity towards certain countries. It's the same, like, with people from Myanmar. I've covered a lot of India. I covered the Delhi rape, but all of these things, like, um, I, I mean, Nepal could have been like Myanmar. It could fall through the cracks and become a dictatorship easily. And we have been through that. And so I would sneak in. Did I second guess myself in those situations? Only there's a you second guess yourself only after you've done it. So while you're in the process of it, you're pumped up with adrenaline. And um, I was nominated for the Rory Peck after I covered the cyclone. I was, I was doing undercover reporting. And in 2008, there was Cyclone Nargis, and a lot of people died. 2007. Um, and that after that, when that happened, a friend of mine warned me that a lot of people who who go through these awards end up dying, and that kind of um, yeah, brought back home like what it means to be that kind of person who's filled up with adrenaline, right?
Mm.
And so it also made me cautious after that. Um, when it comes to, I did a lot of reporting from Nepal after, like, throughout, of course, and even after that. But in that, I didn't have a choice. Um, I I covered the conflict. I covered post-conflict. Um, but when war or conflict happens in your backyard, it becomes a responsibility to cover it. Um, and then you have to take certain cautions, but you have to do it because you can't just watch and stay silent.
Mm.
And you have to let the world know what is going on. And you are probably the best person to be telling those stories.
Mm. It takes a very resilient person to do the type of work that you're doing, I think.
Hmm.
I can imagine if I was doing it, I would probably break down before I can get any of the work done. Um, and I would probably be really scared to go into that area in the first place. So I guess what what coping mechanisms do you use when when you're reporting on a story or when you're making a film about, a war literally in your country, or, someone like Devi, what type of
Mm.
things do you say to yourself to help keep you mentally okay while you are researching and reporting on these things?
So, when you're doing news versus documentaries, it's different. In doing news, you're going, picking up the stories and coming back. Um, you are not there for a very long time. You're not persisting with the story for a very long time. So, obviously, you do your risk assessment. You have to do that, and um, you try to ensure that you are safe, your team is safe, because I did a lot of broadcast, and the people that you're interviewing are safe, that you're not doing any harm. So that's very important. So, that's something that's always been very important for me. Um, and for myself, there's always been the thing of why I'm doing the story. Like it's for getting the information out. And there's always the kind of stories that I've done has always been um, about social justice. There's always been an element of social justice in it. So a level of indignation has always kind of let me move forward. When it comes to long-term research, where there's a lot of trauma involved, like the story of Devi, that persistence in that research has been, I must say, I mean, it's been difficult. It's not been an easy task. So in that, uh, um, I have had to seek help. Um, I personally, I've had to ensure that, I applied for a fellowship, and I got this. I went to the Dart Center. I got a fellowship in called the Ockberg Fellowship in Columbia, which looks into trauma and journalism. But also within, while filming, also we ensure that, with the trauma survivors, they're all like this, the protagonist and all the other people were also trauma survivors. So we had to get a trauma therapist throughout to ensure that they were okay. So there a lot of duty of care comes in to ensure that all of us are okay. And the process of making the film becomes much longer, therefore, um, to make sure that we don't fall apart in the process, right? Um, so it's not an easy process, but it needs to be done.
Mm.
And the telling yourself that this is going to be something that is going to have an enduring effect, and it's going to hopefully, like, make an impact for a lot of people. It keeps me going.
Yeah, I can relate to that part. Like there have been some people that I've interviewed and some of my co-hosts have interviewed where their story is just so harrowing, but we interview them with the hope that
Mm.
people will listen to this interview and it will bring changes in the future. Um, yeah, it's the whole social justice part of it is, I think it takes a certain type of person to do that type of work,
Mm.
whereas a lot of people just like to ignore it or brush it off or sometimes act like it's not actually happening when it really is. I want to know if you have ever faced criticism for any of the stories you've reported on or any of the films that you've made. And if you have, how have you dealt with those critics?
See, I've been doing this work for such a long time that I've had haters, I've had trolls, but then I've also got so much love and appreciation, right? And in the end, it kind of tallies up. and then you end up developing a thick skin, and that's something that you just have to do to move on. And so that's what I've done. It's like you do social media detox, um, and I mean, just do the stuff that you have to do and not bother as much.
Mm, yep, that's definitely the way. And I think, now, well, especially in this day and age where social media and online presence is more than anything else,
Yeah.
you can never keep away from the keyboard warriors. Any type of post, even social media influencers and those type of people have so many negative comments on their posts.
Yeah.
And I think people just have to get to a point where, like, you just have to either not read the posts or, like you said, have a thick skin and just weigh it up with the positives rather than just focusing on the negatives that people
Yeah.
might say to you. Have you ever been told by someone maybe higher up in the industry that there's a certain story you shouldn't report on or a certain film you shouldn't make? You know, I know that some of these type of things can happen in the media industry where the media is sometimes forced to report things with a certain lens. Have you ever been told by anyone, oh, yeah, don't make a movie like that, or angle it differently?
I've always worked as a freelancer, so it has made it a lot easier to report the way I want to. And um, most of the stories that I've done from the areas that I've done, the expertise has been very limited of other people. So in the end, you're almost the expert yourself. So how are they going to know any better, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So it's also like, telling them that you know better. So uh, I have been told that like nobody is going to care about the countries that you're reporting from, but then because I'm a freelancer and doing my films independently, I go and do it anyway.
hmm
Um, it doesn't necessarily mean that I get paid for it, but it also means that I can do the stories that I want to.
yeah. And the people that care about it will support you and come and watch the movie and take an
Exactly.
interest, right? Yeah.
Mm.
Um, Tell us about the process of reporting a story or documenting a film in a country like Nepal. How do you go about finding people to interview for your film? Or, I guess, if you have a person in mind, what process do you take to ensure that they will come on board in your film when they could be scared or in shock or going through trauma? I know you covered a bit of this already with, having counsellors around and people to talk to, but what's the rest of the process about how you get people on board, especially when they're interviews and documentaries?
So with the documentaries, I mean, the reason it takes a long time is like you have to take the the process um, of trust building takes a long time, right? When the kernel of the idea comes in, I mean, you write it down and it kind of I let it fester for a long time, and um, often, you let the story develop. And with Devi, for example, I mean, the idea came in like as early as 2008, but um, she wasn't ready to tell the story, and I just waited for her to be prepared. And so um, when she trusted me totally. So I think that trust building exercise is one of the most important exercise. And for for documentaries like this, it's also like, the aspects of ensuring that there is no harm done to the people that you're making the film on, and to the community, there's no harm done, right? Um, it's actually to be able to tell people's story is a huge honor, and you're just uh, uh, you, it's the film's not about you, it's about them. So it's you're just a conduit, right?
Yep.
So I have to make sure that it's not exploitative, and so it takes a very long time. I let it take the time it takes for the stories to
Mm.
develop.
Have any of the people that you've interviewed for any of your films, um, have they, and I don't know if you would know this, if they tell you or not, but have they ever faced criticism or been threatened or had their life at risk after sharing their story in such a public platform?
Not that I know of. I mean, I have dropped stories and not kind of come out in public after hearing that it could be a problem.
Mm.
After, I mean, even after working for like a couple of years. Um, but um, personal threats I haven't heard.
Mm. That's, yeah, it's something I was kind of wondering. I guess being Indian myself,
Hmm.
I know, a lot of, and this is not just Indian people, but it happens in all ethnicities. But, sometimes people go through things like, for example, what Devi went through, and your parents or your close friends and family might know the truth about what happened to you because you trust that inner circle. But then you might have people in your family telling you, don't tell other people this happened to you, or don't tell too many people, because there's this shame that's always
Hmm.
connotated with things like this that happen, even when it's clearly not her fault that this happened to her. But just don't tell anyone because it will make our family look bad, or what will society say? Um, and that then makes the victim more scared to speak out. And then it just festers more because they're not allowed to talk to anyone about it, let alone actually be in a documentary film that's going to be shown all around the world. Um, I guess I don't know so much about how other ethnicities deal with it because obviously I'm Indian, but how does that type of thing play on people like Devi, where you might have all these other voices around you telling you not to be in a film about this?
So with Devi, it was a little different, right? I mean, she's such a strong human being, and because of the force of her personality, um, it was easier to allow her to be in present on camera. But the rest of the women, I mean, there were quite a few of them who wanted to be on camera, but I was like, absolutely not. It was a decision of mine not to expose them, um, even though they wanted to, and it might feel that I have taken their agency away, but knowing the kind of society that I come from, knowing the kind of society that South Asia is, it's I could not live with the consequence of it.
Mm.
So I understand where you're coming from. It is a grave burden, and there are. I mean, I think um, taking that decision on whether or not to kind of show someone, I think it depends upon their personalities, what they are, right? I mean, if it's someone who is a public person who wants to talk about their sexual abuse, that's completely different than showing a person from a village. who has been exposed to sexual violence. I mean, those two, you cannot put them in the same scale and weigh them together. That's the way I see it.
Mm, yep, that's very true.
Yeah, the
Um,
social capital that a person has is going to make a difference, right?
mm, and it also shows that you're keeping an eye out for them and their well-being because
Mm.
you've been in this industry for long enough to kind of know how it would be reciprocated as well by people
It's
watching
not
it.
only in the industry, it's the society, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Understanding the society, which is a very harsh society for women.
Yep, definitely is. Um, Tell us about some of the other documentaries that you've made before Devi and what led you to making those documentaries.
Well, in my earlier days, I was quite reckless. Um, well, like 14 years ago, when I was pregnant with my firstborn, um, I thought it would be a great idea to go and find out why so many women in Nepal were dying at childbirth. So we went to the remotest parts of Nepal to make a film on precisely that.
Mm.
So that was one of my earlier films. I made films on girls being enslaved in the name of some traditions called the cumlaries, kind of indentured labor. Um, and my latest short film was an intimate film on Dalit journalist. I mean, you know what a Dalit is like.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's her search on why the reason why so many girls were being raped even during COVID, right? And a lot of these films have, well, almost all of them were for television. So that's what I had been doing. Yeah, then I made quite a few, but most of them have, a lot of them have been current affair kind of tilted docos, a few observational, uh, but Devi is my first feature doc.
Mm. That's really interesting. Um, so, as a lead on from that, tell us about some of the awards that you've won for some of your films, and I guess what the awards mean to you and what they mean in the industry.
I mean, for films, I haven't won many awards actually because it's mostly been for news. I've won uh, some of the films I've won like New York Film and TV Awards. Um, Devi has won. We had a world premiere and we got in hot dogs. We got a special mention and it was one of the top 20 audience favorites, which was great. And we also won like a series of pitch awards, which was great. Um, a few of them in Korea, um, which helped us complete the film. When it comes to awards, it's um, the most amusing part of awards is like we got a special mention and when we were pitching at Cannes Docs, and my son was around was 11, and it was during COVID, and he came over and he was like, "Do you get an award?" And I said, "No, we got a special mention." And he was like, "What does that mean?" And I was like, how do you explain that to a child, right? And I said, it means, well done, you can do better. And he looked at me with a disgusted look on his face. And he was like, well, I get that every day.
Oh,
And he walked on, right? So what
you
does
can
awards
definitely
mean?
relate to that feeling.
So I don't know what that means, right? I think awards kind of keep your morale up, and it's great. Um, but it's the audience reactions that means a lot as well. And it would be great to win awards. It would also mean, but it also would mean a lot to get the audience to enjoy the film.
Mm. I think that's one of the things about social activism and that type of work, isn't it? That you're not doing the work for the awards. The awards are nice to have, but you're doing it because you want the world to change in somehow by getting this out there and by the audience being engaged and learning something from watching the film or reading what you've written. The awards are just like oh, that's nice that it's been recognized, but you haven't set out to make your movie with the aim of winning an award as the only goal.
You want to make a good film, a good story, right? I mean, that's the main thing. It's like you want to tell a good story. That's in the end, you want to make a good film that's well crafted. Um, that's you make that into a challenge. And uh, it happens to be that the character is a social activist, and she's quite an amazing social activist, but she's also a mother in this, and it's such a universal story of a mother, right? And yeah, so yeah, awards are great for the person, um, but yeah, you do want a lot of people to watch it in the end. Yeah.
Mm. Back on to Devi herself.
Mm,
She's been described as a survivor to warrior. Can you
mm,
share a little bit more about her journey? I guess between the time that she went through the horrific
mm.
incidents to the time she actually felt comfortable to share it on the big screen. Can you share a bit about her journey and all the social activist steps that she took along the way to get to where she is, and how you managed to capture all of this in the documentary?
So, a little bit of the context is between 1996 and 2006, there was a civil war, a conflict, a communist uprising in Nepal. It was a kind of a guerrilla warfare between what they call themselves a uh, uh, Maoist guerrilla and the Royal Nepal Army at that time. And so the royalist government. So that conflict took over 17,000 lives in Nepal, and a lot of women did get sexually abused, raped in this process. And Devi was one of them. In 1997, she was abducted pretty much by the police when she was 17, and she was raped, um, um, gang raped by the police, and um, tortured because her brother had joined this movement. Um, and in retaliation, she was raped. So I knew about this story because I was a journalist at that time. I had been covering. I was a rookie journalist. I heard about this story because when when Devi was released from custody, she was released. She was kept in jail for a bit, and she was released. The Maoists exposed her. They did a press conference and exposed her as a rape survivor, and made an example of her and said that, look, this woman was raped by the police and how terrible the police are. Now, if you can imagine in a very traditional Hindu society, what does it do to a woman? It means that she can't go back to her house. Everyone knows about the rape. And in that kind of a time in the 90s, and even now, when a woman is raped, it is seen that her dignity is being stolen. And that would mean that there's no room for her at home.
Mm-hmm.
There's no room for her in the society. So what does a woman like that do? In a lot of cases, like a lot of women are expected to kill themselves. Um, Devi wanted to die. She tried to kill herself, but she couldn't. Um, she decided that she was going to join the Maoist army and um, be what she was accused of being. So she became a political person in the Maoist guerrilla, and she joined the front lines. She kind of became what they call the commissar, um, and she rose to the rank because she would take dangerous missions, and that was her backstory. Um, when she was exposed, a lot of people, including um, women, supposedly feminist writers, um, were very rude about her. They did write nasty things about her. There were some who said, like, she was um, tarnishing the reputation of the police, which was a horrible thing to say. Which didn't help at all, which also meant that she never wanted to talk to journalists, and which meant, like, when I later, when the war ended, Devi's brother died, he got killed, but she survived. The complexities of war means, like, you live through this own guilt of surviving, you live through the trauma of rape. I mean, she lived through all of that. So when I tried to reach out to her, she didn't want to talk to me. She became an MP. She won an election. She became for a very short time, for around 6 months, she became minister for physical planning. And this is to kind of to understand that her rise. I mean, this girl had been to school for one day. She's self-taught completely. So when I reached out to her a few times, but we kept watching each other, and governments came, the Maoists changed, the peace process did not really take into account the rape survivors. What happened was, when the when war ended in 2006, a comprehensive peace accord was built. One of the main things was they were going to have was a truth and reconciliation process. That's something that happens in most of the wars. And a part of it was that wartime rape was also going to be addressed. But even till now, none of the women have got anything. Their files have not been opened. Whereas for all the other, there are 64,000, around 64,000 other cases which have been registered, and they all have got some form of a reparation, interim relief. So it took a long time for Devi to get to a point where she was like, all the men are not going to listen to women. All the men want to bury it under the carpet. So because we were watching each other, and she kind of had built a trust on me, at one point she agreed to a short interview, and then she gave me her diary, where she had um, written about what had happened to her, and she basically said, you can do whatever you want. It started from that. And um, so when you're given a responsibility like this, right, you have to do something. So I thought I'd just make a 15-minute film and it'll be done. But in the first sit down interview, she said, what if 100 women went off and did something? What if 100 women went to the parliament and demanded a recognition? What would happen? And that led us to thinking like, if you really want to do it, then let's figure this out. And so we ended up making this longer film. We had to kind of do it in secrecy. We really had to kind of figure out a way to ensure that she could build this movement. And we were going to keep filming it. And we reached out to a trauma therapist. And that's how we slowly built this. So it's like it's the power of storytelling. What it does, it kind of unleashes uh, unleashes something in you, right? Storytelling unleashes something in you.
Does definitely. Just hearing what she went through, just unbelievable. And that the whole thing you said about, not exposing the police or people telling her not to expose the police. Oh, that happens in India all the time. And it happens in a lot of countries too. And
Yeah.
it's that whole thing that something unjust happens to you and you're told not to talk about it, and you're told
Yeah.
not to tell people who did this to you. It's
Mm.
why? I don't understand why people have to protect rapists, or why people have to protect criminals. It's very strange. It's something that over the last few years, actually, I've wondered a lot about. If someone does something wrong to you, why is it your duty to protect their name? They just shouldn't have done that bad thing to you. That's like very simply put, that's how my mind that sums it up.
Yeah, it's also about like, protecting the rapist. It's also about protecting the men's reputation. Protecting the rapist in this particular case was also about like, defending the nation. And somehow nationality, like in nationalism, patriotism, all of these things became tied up with this women's virtue. And like, how does virtue have to be, gets tied up with rape? How is So all of these things are, it's very convoluted. It's really messed up.
It's all entwined.
Yeah.
Um, there was something else. Oh, you mentioned how she was basically on TV as, being told she was
Mm,
raped.
mm.
Was she asked if she could be on TV, or was it just done to her?
It it wasn't on TV. It was a press conference, and I know it wasn't in television. It was all journalists kind of
Mm.
gathered in a this place called Reporters Club, and yeah, she was just exposed like that. Uh, Photos were exposed, but not.
Yeah.
It wasn't TV.
So she didn't even know that that was going to happen.
Mm. She was told the day before.
Oh, wow. And she probably had
Yeah.
no choice in it. There's probably like, you're going to be in a press conference tomorrow. There was probably no question about, do you want to be in a press conference? I can imagine.
She was told that it was going to happen, and then she thought it was. I mean, again, don't forget, like, her brother was in the Maoist, and she really thought her brother was the biggest, greatest thing ever, because her brother was educated. Her brother was took care of her, and she was a daughter, uh, and nobody actually cared for a daughter, right?
Mm,
In that kind of a village situation. Her mother wanted to get her married at the age of 13.
mm,
I mean, that's the kind of situation that she came from, and her brother protected her. So she had this amazing like sense of indebtedness towards her brother. So that was one thing. And so when she met the Maoists, she thought they were amazing because they were what her brother was following, and she should just do whatever they was telling her to do. So there was a lot of like, there were multiple things going on in her mind, which took her a lot of years to deconstruct. When she was taken to India and made to do the same press conference, and she didn't understand what was going on over there either. It took her years in the middle of making this film, 3 years on, she kind of, it hit her. She was like, I was being used. Like
Yep.
when I told her, she didn't, she was like, no, 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 no. It was probably a good thing that I was made to tell my story. And then 3 years on, it was just like
But
2 years ago, she said, I didn't realize I was being used. So yeah.
yeah, they were just taking advantage of someone that's already
Yeah.
very vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that's what happens a lot in these
Yes.
situations. Or they purposely give you the wrong advice or the
Mm.
wrong, knowing that you'll just believe whatever these authorities are telling you.
Yeah.
Oh, there's so much I would want to ask, but people have to watch the film, I think, to get all
Yes.
these questions answered. Um, I've got a couple of other questions before we wrap up. What topics have you not yet covered that you would like to make a film or write articles about in the future?
I mean, I keep thinking that I'm going to do like fun films in the future. I'm not quite sure, actually. I've just come out of such a heavy film. There are some projects that I'm thinking about, but I've not really made it concrete yet.
Mm. Um, I thought of something else as you were talking about your son a couple of times during this interview. So obviously, you've travelled a bit for some of the documentaries you've made and for some of the work you've done. So how do you juggle family life with your work life, especially when you have to travel away from home?
Um, Both me and my husband have to travel, so we take turns. So yeah, so he just came back yesterday from a 3-week trip, uh, and I leave in 2 weeks. So yeah, we sometimes we're like ships at passing at night, and pass on the baton and move on. Um, and we also kind of like, try to ensure that the kids are um, capable of taking care of themselves, and they're very understanding, um, and quite independent as young people. Yeah.
Mm, that's good. It takes teamwork, right? I think,
Yeah.
um, and women having all the roles that women have in life, sometimes it's very hard for them to travel away from their family because sometimes even if their husband is at home with the kids, sometimes the household falls apart if the mother's not there, and then the mother might feel guilty for leaving. Um, and then she might not take that job where she has to travel, and then it's a bit of a vicious cycle after that. So I'm really glad to hear that you and your husband both take turns and that he also travels for work. It sounds like there's a lot of equality that happens in your household.
Yeah, there is a lot of that. My son does a lot of cooking. My daughter
Oh,
doesn't though.
that's good.
And she kind of, yeah, she kind of gives a bit of my own medicine to me. Like every time I ask her to do a little bit of cooking or anything, she's like, "You're reinforcing patriarchy," and I'm like, "No, darling. All I'm doing is trying to get you to cook for yourself."
Some life skills.
Life
Yeah.
skills.
I'm
Yeah.
like that with my husband actually. He's a really good cook and he actually enjoys cooking. I cook more out of necessity. And whenever sometimes he'll be like, "Oh, I've cooked 3 times this week. You've only cooked once." I just give it back to him. I'm like, "No, it's okay. Equality. I believe in equality." I just keep on saying that. And then he just gives up and does it anyway. um, what have been some of your happiest and most memorable moments while reporting and filming?
Um, I mean, there have been so many in terms of memorable moments because there's like I've got decades, but I think the most impactful has been this film, right? So Devi and all the survivors have managed to make an amendment to the Truth and Reconciliation Bill, and that has meant that a lot of their demands for recognition, for reparation is in the bill, and it's in the parliament right now. And I feel so proud about that. I mean, I've done a lot of things that have been good for me, but this form of an impact, which is far more beyond me, it's that's been quite amazing. And that's, I suppose, this it makes me a lot more prouder. And I just really hope that it keeps growing, because I think um, the film in many ways has a resonance that's beyond Nepal. And um, it I'm just hoping that um, it'll make a lot of people kind of really understand the impact uh, the long-term impact of sexual violence and wartime rape. So that, I think, would be the proudest moment.
Mm, that's good to hear. I guess not good to hear, bittersweet that something good is coming out of something that was so bad. I just can't get over the fact that it's been almost 20 years since, you know, that bill was passed, yet all these women are still waiting for their, I don't even know what the word would be, for their fairness, or for their, for something to be shown towards injustice. To
Mm.
me, it just kind of seems like the government just said it back in 2006 for the sake of it, without ever wanting to follow through. But I don't know, that's my assumption from the outside. It shouldn't take 18 years to find um, justice or start making amends in some way.
Yeah, but I think that's what governments end up doing, and governments end up kind of uh, overlooking the people that are the most vulnerable, right? And so, and it's also that when people look at Nepal, often people like people don't see anything beyond the mountains. Like, I mean, New Zealand and Nepal have such a strong connection, like, right? I mean, it's been what, 71 years since Everest was
Yes.
climbed. I mean, this is 71 years since Ed Hillary and Tenzing Norgay went up Everest. And people talk about the mountains, but then there are mountain women, women from the mountains who have endured and have made great sacrifices. So I think it is also important to recognize that these women exist. These women are amazing. And so I really hope that people start seeing Nepal in all its complexities, right? So I think that's that's one of the things that uh, um, that's important. That countries are complex, and when only one aspect is seen often, then uh, all the other aspects are overshadowed.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Just before we finish up, is there anything that you want to mention that we haven't covered already about your career or about the film?
Um, I just hope that a lot of people will come and watch it. Docker starts in June, and I will be in Christchurch for the screening on Sunday the 23rd and Thursday the 27th. So it'll be really nice to meet a lot of people, and we're hoping that Devi will also be there. So she's applied for a
Oh,
visa, and it will be
amazing.
amazing. Yeah.
Oh, hopefully the
So
visa comes through in time.
yeah, it should. I think darkish people, and they're chasing it up. So yeah, I think in all probabilities, Davy will also be there. So it'll be amazing to see a lot of people and have a really good conversation about the film. So yeah, and it, yeah, that's the most important thing. It's like to see a lot of people.
Oh, I might have to make a trip to Christchurch now. I was going to go to the film in Wellington because that's where I live, but knowing that you and Devi are not coming to Wellington,
But that's in
um,
July.
yes.
So yeah, Wellington and Auckland will be in July. So we will be there on the 23rd and 27th of June. So there you go.
So,
Come,
so
bring
if
your friends
anyone,
and family.
yeah, if anyone who lives in Christchurch is listening to this, you can buy tickets to it. It's screening in Christchurch, as Subina said, on the 23rd and 27th in Christchurch, in Auckland on the 13th of July, and also the Roxy Cinema in Wellington on the 13th of July. And there's also a virtual option from the 15th to the 31st of July. So there's many ways you can watch the film. You can just go on the Dock Edge Film Festival website to buy the tickets. And would you like to do a shout out for your socials or your websites or anything so people can follow you?
Yeah. So we yeah, follow us at devidocumentary.com has all the detail, and follow us on Instagram at Devi Documentary, and we have all our details over there. And so yeah, please follow us. Please come and hang out with us.
Thank you so much for your time today. And yes, I've watched the film, and I highly recommend anyone who's interested to go and watch it. You will not regret it.
Thank you,
Thank
Harita.
you.
It's been delightful.
Awesome.